Hi guys, this is Allison Gilliard with Runner Story. Today's runner story is Mr. Jim Mather. Wow, what a story. What an incredible life of running he's done and he still has. I appreciated him sharing so much of how he has seen running, especially like with races, how they've evolved, like how cool that was to sit here with him and just to chat about that and to see how things once were and how they are now. And I'm just so grateful for race directors and what all they put on and the history that Mr. Jim shares. Not only that, guys, he shares his story of having a heart attack while running and he diagnosed himself. Guys, you want to listen to this. It's so good. I was already a fan of Mr. Jim Mather because I follow him on social media and we know of each other, and his wife is so dear and so sweet, and so this was such a treat to be able to sit down with him and to hear his story. I had no idea, not a clue, any of it. So this, to me, I took away so much from that. Not only does he talk about running physically, but also spiritually. And yes, it's so true. And I was just so grateful for that. So guys, he brings in a lot. I am thankful for the runners that have gone before us and that will come after us, the legacy that we will build. And so, guys, enjoy Mr. Jim Mather's runner story. Well, I'm very excited, especially since I follow you on social media and I see all the cool things you do. So we have Mr. Jim Mather. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be with you today.
So what is your run story? Because I know it's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm an old guy, so so I've been around a long time. I'm 63.
Whoa, seriously?
And I ran my first race when I was 5 years old.
Wow. Do you remember what race it was?
Yeah, it was my father's company picnic. And I have good memories of that because that was my first race. And the backstory to that is my father and my uncle, he only has one brother, were both runners. And my uncle spent his entire life as a runner and coach. And teacher. So he had that, and my father was a runner and he was a volunteer coach in Philadelphia. It was called the Philadelphia Pioneers Track Club, which was famous back in the day and still exists to this day.
Oh, that's amazing.
And my uncle was the mentor and coach for an athlete and coach who's the most winning coach in NCAA history. That is Coach Mark Whitmore of University of Colorado, the Buffaloes. And so I was like a kid hanging around, and it was always about, even when we had family gatherings, we had relay races.
Stop it.
Yeah, and my dad set up pole vault and high jump and triple jump, long jump, hurdles in my backyard.
Wow.
Once we moved out of Philly, now we couldn't do that. We'd always did sports, and so I remember my memories of that first race where I didn't win. I just couldn't believe it.
Oh,
I got third. I can remember I got third out of like about 50 kids.
And you were 5.
I was 5, and I was just like, man, third's not good enough. And back in those days, they had television commercials. I was born in 1959, so we'll say early 60s. And before there were Brooks and Nike, anything like that, there was a television commercial for children's shoes for little sports for kids. That was called the PF Flyers. And they make you run faster and jump higher. That was the lingo. So I got those things on, the PF Flyers, and I got out on that sidewalk, and I was just like, I got to go faster. And I just couldn't wait to become like my uncle and father. So it shows the importance of mentoring and the example. So we become largely what we're influenced to become. And it's good and bad. Yeah, sure. Because if our identity gets wrapped up too much in running or anything else, I've heard it said by a man much smarter than me, he said that when you make a good thing an ultimate thing, it's no longer a good thing. Oh, that's good. Yeah. And so I went through a phase in my life where running became more serious when I was in high school. And then after high school, I joined the military. Oh, wow. And I thought I was leaving running behind, but then it turned out there was such a thing as road racing in the late 70s, which was developing, and I was just like, wow, I'm still young. And I joined the military at age 17, United States Air Force, just shy of my 18th birthday. So after my training and all of the stuff you do where you're very busy, I was like, hey, maybe I could do some road racing. And I got a little successful, and it got out of balance. And so I went through a phase where I had to let go of that.
Wow.
I had to let go of something that was good. And that was encapsulated by me being set free from a half-truth. I'm a voracious reader. I love to read and study and learn, and I was reading hundreds of books when I was a single guy in the military because I worked long hours in the middle of the night in the hospital laboratory, 3 a.m. I was like, I think I'll knock out a book. So one of the books that I read was by a doctor, I think he was a clinical psychologist perhaps, I'm not sure, but the title of the book was Positive Addiction.
Oh, okay.
So this was when I was in my phase of running a lot, training for marathons, stuff like that. And I thought, wow, that's me. I'm so focused on running, besides working. I thought, it must be good. This guy says it's good. But looking back, that was a very dangerous book because it was half-truth. Because we're not just physical beings.
That's right.
We're a spiritual being, we're emotional being. And when you're in your late teens, early 20s, you're forming identity. And so I started seeing my name in the paper back then before the internet. That's how you found out who was winning or losing. So I was like, oh, wow, look, I'm in the mix for this championship of the state of Alaska. There was this running series. Wow. I was in the military there. And I thought, I was like, yeah, that's something to be proud of. I think my uncle would be proud of that. My father would be proud of that. But it was just whacked. Should have been just fun. It shouldn't have been identity. But you don't know that if your identity is not based on something solid. So that's sort of the backstory of my running story, because that's my early years.
Yeah.
And then moving on from there, later, around that time, after I had a very debilitating injury from overuse, which is part of the problem of addiction, is I had torn cartilage just from running in the snow and the ice of Alaska. Didn't know that there would be detrimental effects to that, so I'm running and I'm enjoying it. Incredible beauty, but there's this stuff going on. So damaged the knee, one of my knees, torn cartilage. And because I was sort of hooked on it, I kept going. And I was like, I'm not going to get surgery. I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to keep running. And the turning point was when I ran Anchorage Midnight Sun Marathon on this torn cartilage. And after that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. My knee was just giving out, and I just knew I had to stop running. But I didn't realize that by stopping running, since it was an addiction, there was going to be an emotional impact.
Wow.
And it was like sort of a depression. It wasn't diagnosed or anything.
Sure, yeah.
I just felt like out of sorts. I didn't feel peaceful. And it was a spiritual crisis. So that was age 20. So it was my 20th year. Went through all this stuff. The marathon was an incredible experience running. Managed to run because like when you're young, you can overcome stuff even when you probably shouldn't be overcoming it. So I finished that and then couldn't run for a long time because I didn't get proper treatment.
Sure.
But that negative thing led to a spiritual awakening. Because when you let go of a basis for identity which is not healthy, you might be able to encounter something which is beyond your physical or your mental abilities.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Or your vocational dreams,
sure.
or your others' expectations. All these things can create false identities. So, yeah, and finally came to the conclusion, I think people were praying for me and different things were happening. Hey, man, I think I need to find the Lord. I wouldn't put it in those terms because I didn't know what that meant. Sure. But I had friends that reached out to me, prayed for me, and on August 2nd, 1980, in Anchorage, Alaska, I was born again.
Wow, that's incredible.
And my prayer was a very deep spiritual prayer. It was, help!
Why?
Yeah, because I knew I was in a desperate situation. And all of this is kind of a long story, but that's sort of like the backdrop, because nevertheless, God can restore things to you which are out of balance. So running wasn't a bad thing. It had just become out of balance. And I see a lot of runners get into trouble with that because it's such a good thing. Say if you're out of balance, say if you're using alcohol inappropriately, or you're in a failed relationship, or work sucks, or whatever the issue might be, you say, well, at least I have my running. Yeah, that can be a good thing, but I always hold good things carefully. And I've had to do that so many times in my life, because now I'm in my 60s. I've had just about every decade some major significant thing happen in my life that I had to reevaluate even the good things in my life. And those who know me over the last, say, 15 years have seen me go through a very serious bout of cancer. I had melanoma in my right eye.
Wow.
Which was a very high fatality rate. And I was training. That was one of those moments, just when my running seems to get better or good. If something goes sideways, I was in incredible shape getting ready for the Mobile half marathon. Everything was going well. And then one day I was out volunteering at the Mobile County Cross Country Championship, and my right eye went blank. And I could see nothing.
Whoa.
And I initially was diagnosed as a retinal detachment. Turned out to be a large tumor in my eye.
Wow.
And I had just been preparing for a trip to Nepal. I do a lot of missionary work overseas. And I couldn't go to Nepal.
Man.
And I couldn't run. All these different things happened. And I was 51 years old, so 12 years ago. But I never lost peace. Because on the other side, my previous crisis as a young man, I didn't have that spiritual peace, but I had total peace. Diagnosed, the doctor said, you should be freaking out. This is very deadly. I was like, no, I have peace about it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm not nuts. Sometimes spirituality can be out of balance as well. So I was like, yeah, this is bad. It sucks, but hey, it's not going to destroy my walk with God. I have something deeper, my sight. And it did cost me my sight. I blinded my right eye now because of the treatment. I had a surgery to insert radiation inside my eye.
Wow.
And over time that led me to be blind. And that's led to a lot of other stuff. Other terrible injuries because I still run, and I've had some bad injuries. I tore my ACL, broke my left leg, broken right ankle, because don't have the luxury of always being with people to be my guides.
Gotcha.
So I step into holes, I fall down, and that's just part of life. And then 1.5 years ago, suddenly and unexpectedly, I had a heart attack.
Wow.
While I was out running. Fortunately, my wife is strongly encouraging me. She said, hey, you need to have people with you as much as possible.
Sure.
So I try. And I had 2 young people in their 20s, a volunteer, husband and wife.
Oh, wow.
A volunteer to be with me. And the young lady came for the first time. She's like, I don't want to run. My husband's done it, but for whatever reason, she came that morning, and she was the angel that discovered me laying on the ground.
Wow.
Because they had run ahead. She had never run before, but I told them I'm not feeling that well, so I just stopped and was walking. Previously, there was no sign of anything, but I had this unusual feeling, and just didn't feel well. So I was like, hey, I'd better not push it.
Sure.
So I was just walking, and finally got to the point where they'd run ahead. This is at the campus of South. It's the Swamp Loop.
No, that loop.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they went ahead, and I'm a registered nurse. I've got a lot of different career paths that
I love that. That's awesome.
So I worked for several years as a coronary care ICU nurse.
Wow.
So I know the symptoms. I know what you should do in the event of an emergency. So I just triaged myself, and laid down on the ground. And then I said, okay, Lord, here I am. And the young lady's named Brooke, and she felt a strong urge. I don't know how far ahead she was of me, but she turned around, started running in my direction, and saw me on the ground. And I could hear her footsteps as she got closer, and I looked up at her and I said, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but I'm having a heart attack.
Wait.
I didn't want to upset her, and she did. She was pretty in shock. And just as I said that, this is 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, I think. And no, it couldn't have been a Saturday because cars wouldn't have come by. So a car pulled up just as I said that to her. And a lady wound down her window, and she said, hey, do you guys need help? And Brooke was like, yeah, we need to go to the hospital. So we rushed over to the hospital, picked up my wife on the way.
Stop.
Yeah, and I stepped out of the car that was giving me the ride, and I said, I need my ID, and I'm having this heart attack. And my wife goes, what the heck? Just get in the car. I was like, it's good to have the ID. So off I go, and I walk into the ER, Providence Hospital. And
Wow.
I said, I'm having a heart attack, which is really important to do if you are lucid.
Right. Sure.
Because then all the attention comes your way.
Yeah.
And God's providence was that the on-call cardiologist was walking right behind me as I walked in.
Wow.
He had just pulled in. So they set me up. They did all the stuff. I can read EKG, so I looked at my own EKG. I said, oh, wow, yeah, I'm having a heart attack. And they were like, who is this guy? He's dying
This is
himself.
a wild story.
Yeah, so they just freaked them out. They thought it was some sort of freak test run. It was like I'm a plant. I'm like, and I didn't go into it. And they whisked me in for cardiac catheterization / angioplasty, and I had 100% blockage of the main artery. So probably another 30 minutes and I would be in heaven. So I just prayed, and it seems like a kind of a facetious prayer, but it was a very serious prayer. because I felt total peace during the whole time. I always wonder, how would you feel if you were dying? Well, now I know. I had absolute peace, but I also had, thank God, the lucidity to pray, a lucid prayer, I think. And I said, Lord, I'm ready to be with you. But my wife's named Mary, and Mary has told me several times, you're not permitted to die before me.
Oh.
So I said that to the Lord. I said, Lord, you know what Mary has said to you and me. And I said, I'm just going to commit that to you. And things went well in the cath lab. Obviously, I'm here talking to you.
Wow.
It's the brevity of life is always ever present. Working as a nurse, prior to that, I've always worked in hospitals. Prior to that, I was a laboratory technologist.
Wow.
So worked at a lot of nights, seen a lot of emergencies. Nobody wants to be an emergency.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of a story because it is connected. Everything's connected. I mean, even though we're running podcasts and I continue to run, I ran a 5K like 2.5 months after the heart attack.
Wow.
I ran a 12K a few months after that. The same group came back together, two young couple, Brooke and Michael, and they're wonderful. And I call her my angel, but it was a very traumatic experience for her, really. But God has a purpose in everything, and that's what I told her. And I tell people that I minister to. I'm a pastor / cross-cultural missionary. My life revolves around the nations. I minister to international students from all over the world and have for 25 years.
That's awesome.
So another vocational shift, because one of my other journeys was to the mountains of Pakistan. I lived there in the 90s.
Wow.
To help start a hospital. Oddly enough, my specialties in nursing have paralleled with my own physical dilemmas.
I was going to say, because one was an eye clinic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I diagnosed myself in both situations. I was doing my own eye test in my bedroom because I didn't want to tell Mary and freak her out when my eye went wacko, and I wasn't sure if I could hold off on going to Nepal, which was scheduled a few days after my eye issues showed up. And then with the heart pain, I thought I had to actually sort of talk to myself and say, what would I do if I was in a professional mode now, as opposed to what do I want to do?
Sure, yeah.
Because men are, by and large, this is a generalization, for my generation, we're always told, just be tough. So we have a high cardiac death rate from heart attacks. Women have, because of their traditionally, at least in my generation, we're more nurturing, used to nurture and be more empathetic and in touch with how you feel. So they tend to seek out care faster. So I knew that tendency in me. It's the way I was raised, to be tough, quote unquote, dangerous lifestyle. So I did the right thing in spite of my initial desire, which was whatever. I don't really want to go to the hospital on either case.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't want to discover.
But you were having a heart attack.
Yeah, I was having a heart attack. And the pain is pretty severe.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like,
wow.
There's hard to describe.
Yeah.
And your vision is your vision, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's
Thank
incredible.
God for 2 eyes.
Right.
Now I have one that functions.
That's what, talking about your students, you run with them.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. When I stopped running for, I don't know, most of my married life because of children. I have 3 children and jobs, working nights.
Sure.
And just, that was something that wasn't a priority. And I tried to get back when my kids started getting older in Pakistan, but it's not cultural there.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, because I went for a run in Pakistan. I lived in the mountains. I thought, this is perfect.
Yeah.
I could be really fit. Running high altitude. And I was running by my neighbor's house, and he said to me, if you keep running like that, we're just going to shoot you.
What?
Not us personally, because we know
yeah.
you, but everybody else is going to think the word is daku. They said if you're running, you're either one or two things. You're either in the military, which is okay. Otherwise, you're a thief. So we shoot thieves.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, I think running is not going to happen. so I had a mountain bike, and I just biked, and I was super fit just from that.
Wow.
And I got real thin over there, a good diet, just lean. Like my main diet was lentils and vegetables, fresh veggies and fruit. And very rarely would I eat meat. That's like maybe a few celebrations a year and chicken once in a while. All of it was very lean. So then I came to Mobile. And I stepped on the line to race, but to watch the start of the 1999 Azalea Trail Run.
Wow.
And of course, my background in running, I was thrilled. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I'd heard about the Azalea Trail when I was a young man.
Okay.
Because I started running seriously when I was in the 70s, and that's when the Azalea Trail Run started.
Okay.
So I knew all those guys, one of whom I got to meet at the Azalea Trail Run, Bill Rogers.
Wow.
But I started running, and then, of course, I work with international students, and some of them are athletes. And so some of them are NCAA champions, and even though they're extremely good, I still build a relationship with them. And when they're downtime, I just want to go for an easy run. I was like, hey, you want to go for a run? And some of them are like excited about that. Some of them worry for me. They're like, one guy who won the NCAA championship in the 1500, I was out running on campus, and his name's Vincent Rono. He won the 1500 meters, and I think he got second one year. He got won it 1 year, second time. He saw me running, and he grabbed me by the shoulders. He was running the opposite directions, and he stopped running. He put his hands on my shoulders and said, "Sir, please sit down." He's like, "You should not do this. This is not good."
Wow.
And he said, in my country, in Kenya, when you hit your age, people sit down.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I'm not going to sit down. Sorry. But it's a fellowship thing. I just go out there, hear their story, get to know them.
Sure.
I'm a fanatic fan, so I'm out there cheering whenever I'm able to see them compete and stuff.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, and then we even formed our own running club.
Get out of here.
Yeah, because one of the guys that was running for South, his name is Samson Kipchirchir, and local runners would know him from the 2000s and up to around 2015 or 16. He lived here.
Okay.
Graduated from South. Great guy. Wound up becoming the elite athlete coordinator for Peggy Olive for the Azalea Trail. And he said he needed help, so I helped him. We worked together to get the elite athletes to come in. But at the same time, he said to me, hey, people like to run, you like to run. Friends of International, which is the name of our ministry, we should have a running club. I talked to Peggy about it with Port City Pacers, so we had a team for several years.
Wow.
But we were sort of like unfair. It was unfair because I had a few Kenyans on my team that used to run for South. I had these Japanese students, who the Japanese students are very methodical. Like if you tell them something, they'll just do it. They're tenacious. I had one girl that had never run before. She was a 20-year-old student from Japan, but she was a swimmer, so she was fairly athletic in Japan. And jokingly, I said to her at the start of the Battle of Mobile 5K, I said to her, your job, and I was completely joking, but I have a little sarcasm in my humor, and I said to her, your job today is when the gun goes off, you get to the front of the pack, and no women are allowed to pass you. Do you understand? She says, yes, sir. Yes, Jim-san. And she bowed. She said, yes, Jim-san. And
she was dead serious.
She was dead serious. I was joking. Gun goes off, she takes off. And she won.
Wow.
But at the end of the race, 5K, she just falls down, collapses. And I was just like, oh my God, what have I done? And it was supposed to be a fun trip. We were going to this 5K and then go to the beach, walk on the beach. And we took her to the beach and she just slept the whole time. And when she woke up, she says, I will never do that again,
right.
Jim-san. And I'm like, I will never ask anyone in that manner to just do that. But that's kind of the fun stuff we did, and we had fun.
Yeah, I love that. I love the Azalea Trail for that simple fact of after you get done, they used to do it where you would see like the loop, the TV loop. Yeah. So you would see like Kenya, no one else.
Yeah.
And then Kenya. And so to
I'm
me,
not sure what's happening now. I think I'm
extraordinary.
not sure we're doing the elite athletes anymore, but for for years, it was the most famous 10K in the United States.
It was incredible, yeah. To know that you were running the same race that they were.
Yeah, my first year coming
but...
back as a master, I stopped running for, a long time. So I started back on the Azalea Trail Run of 2000.
Okay.
So I just turned 40, and my recollection of that race is really funny. First of all, I work really long hours sometimes with Friends of International, and we'd had a dinner party the night before.
Okay.
I got to bed at like 1 a.m., and I was just working that whole time, just feeding people, doing stuff. And I drove down to the race with another student who was an athlete. So we get on the starting line, and it was a hot day. Sometimes it can get hot.
That's right, yeah.
And I thought to myself, I didn't say it out loud, I thought, why in the world am I doing this? Anyway, the gun goes off, and I start running, and I hadn't properly trained.
Okay.
I was good for a 5K. But anyway, I get to the 5K mark. I have no idea. Didn't wear Garmin. There was no watches.
Okay.
Maybe somebody has a good watch back then, but I didn't. And I'm just running, and I get what I think is near the finish line. So I yell out to it like a paramedic or something, because I'm not feeling that great. And I said, hey, how far do I have to the finish? And he goes, you're about halfway. And I'm like, oh, crap. And I staggered home. And that particular race, my son, not that one, but that was another memory, but it's mixed up. The next year, the Azalea Trail was even worse. I was near the finish line. This time I'm feeling pretty good too. But my son starts yelling at me, Joshua, who's now a runner, and he goes, Dad, don't let the gorilla beat you. There was somebody in that race that was dressed up in a gorilla suit.
Wow.
And just flew right by me. And I'm like, Okay. It's about humility. It's about enjoying the moment instead of worrying about what your pace is. So the difference between a 20-year-old and a master's runner, and I get slower and slower, but the good news about running into your elder years is you see everything. You see everything from a different perspective.
Oh, that's good.
So whereas when I was younger, I was always the individualist. I wouldn't run with other people. I trained by myself. Everything was private. Now I find it's all about relationship. And of course, that's a part of the spiritual transformation. Values reorient. It's not about did I win?
Sure.
It's about have I made a friend? And I think that's what it's about. So even really good athletes are finding that. I work a lot. You mentioned me working with international athletes. Well, these are my friends. I'm like a grandpa to them.
Oh, I love that. They tell you not to run.
They call me grandpa. One girl, Antoinette Chariot, who's like me as a nurse, and she's always telling me, slow down. And very first day I met her, she walked into my house as a new student, and she's like, hi, Grandpa.
Aww.
And, that when you're young, like say middle age, like I'm now a senior, but when you're, say, in your 40s, that's kind of, you feel embarrassed by that. Like when you get to be over 60, which I'm very comfortable with my age, I was like, wow, that's a compliment, because that's a term of endearment. But I have to also help them, because even though they're excellent, scholarship, the pressures are incredible. There's, for the young ladies, there's body image issues that they deal with, especially runners. There's body image just for even non-athletes, just because Instagram, social media, and then the pressure's intense to keep earning your scholarship. Just think if you're from a small town in Kenya, or even a European athlete who comes in and has an accident and gets injured, struggling academically, whatever the issue is. Yeah, we need friends, we need mentors, we need people to believe in us no matter what the results are. And so even people that are quote unquote, maybe they start out for all the right reasons, but they get a little success or they get a little too involved. They don't have the balance in any area of their life. We need somebody that's a close friend that come up to and say to us, are you okay? Are you sure are you sure you should run that race? I mean, you're just coming back from an injury. And to love someone, sometimes you have to say things that wouldn't exactly be easy. I wish I had the openness to those kind of relationships when I was in my late teens, early 20s, because I went sideways for a while.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. That's good stuff, my friend. Wow. So you've talked about all these incredible journeys that you've had. So what are some lessons that you've learned from running?
Yeah, running is a school for understanding pain. There's a famous surgeon by the name of Dr. Brand who wrote a couple of books. One of the books that he wrote was Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. He's a Christian surgeon who specialized in treating people with leprosy.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, he was a hand surgeon specialist. So his second book was a book on understanding pain. And in leprosy, it's a bacterial disease which causes damage to the nerve endings. And so you can no longer feel pain. And then everything, if you don't feel pain, you destroy your hands, you destroy your body, because you don't feel the injury.
Yeah.
So that was a book that I read when I was a new believer back in the early 80s. And the older you get, the more you encounter different kinds of pain.
Sure.
So understanding that when I'm in pain, it's not an idea of being sadomasochistic and enjoying pain, but there's always a lesson in pain. So I'm looking for that. I'm like, God, what is the reason for this? I've had, just 2 years ago, several months of pretty severe pain after my ACL tear.
Sure.
I didn't adequately do physical therapy. My whole body was out of balance. And I was trying to get back into running, and it threw off everything.
Sure.
So it was misery. But over time, patience, it's what I love the scripture. It says it's through faith and patience that we inherit God's promises. So I wrote a note about this on my Facebook just 2 days ago, is that all healing is a process.
Ooh, yeah.
So runners are encountering pain. So this is my word to my runner friends. We're always nursing an injury. We're either coming out of an injury, we're approaching the precipice of an injury, or by the grace of God, we're in that beautiful green pasture of wellness. Psalm 23. So we're there. So all of that is just a part of it, and you can't fast forward your way out of pain.
That is really good.
You just can't.
Wow.
Because there's a purpose in pain. I always say it like this. is you're never, ever going to stop being a human. So allow yourself to be human. Allow yourself to fail. Allow yourself to rejoice when you're rejoicing. That beautiful scripture, Romans 12, weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice. And running community does that pretty well because we celebrate each other's victories, right?
Yeah.
But we also have to be available, be sensitive, be empathetic for those who are suffering. And sometimes it's really an art to do that. Because if we're not careful, we can give a false empathy or a false sense of encouragement simply because we don't like silence. We're not sure what to say. People that are grieving a loss. So we've got to be better listeners. My wife is really an excellent listener. So when people are in crisis, they usually don't want to talk to me. I'm getting better because of her, because we've been married so long. But she's an incredible listener, and she's very empathetic. So another thing I would say is be kind to yourself. That's another thing I have to say to people. It's like, hey, yesterday there was a young girl from Denmark who's my neighbor, and she's on scholarship as a runner. And I love her. She's a wonderful young person. She lives with other athletes, but she has had a series of mishaps. She was hit by a car on campus.
Wow.
Had to have surgery. Very traumatic. She's had some COVID, different things, and she's not running like she would like to run. And it's hard for her to talk about. But I try to keep my eye out for her, keep my door open. I saw her walking fast past my house, and I'm like, I shouted out her name. And I said, Emma. She stopped, and I said, hold on a second. And I came up, and I put my arm around her shoulder, and I said, you know what? You're unconditionally loved. You're unconditionally loved. I know it hurts not to be with your teammates right now. They're in Birmingham competing. But I just want you to know you're valuable just as you are, and we're with you through this season. And whether you're a competitive athlete or whether you're a beginning athlete, it's the same in terms of our humanness. Is we have pain, we have a sense of failure sometimes. We're just like, when can I ever do this? New Year's Eve, a young girl from Bangladesh was celebrating downtown with her friends. She didn't know anything about the New Year's celebration. Her friends and said, hey, you need to come down. So she comes down, she's standing in the crowd, and the shooting happened. And out of the many bullets that were fired, she was shot. And she was shot through the leg, and it fractured her bone in pieces. And so we've tried to care for her. My wife and I take her to the doctor, take her to surgery, do all these things. So yesterday she pulled up into my driveway with my wife, and I said to her, I've been praying for you. And she's very appreciative of that. And I said, but you know what? When I was praying for you, I saw something. And I said, I saw you running. And she says, oh, I love to run. I'd like to be able to do that again. But I have all these other health issues. I'm like, you know what? I believe that God is going to do something and special for you. And I'm going to run with you. And that's what faith is.
Sure.
There's a faith in God, but there's then a faith in other people.
Oh, that's good.
But the most loving thing you can say to another human being is, I believe in you. Because we have so many other words to our spirit. I can remember as a child, my parents tried the best of the way they can to raise me. But they had rough childhoods. My father's father abandoned him when he was 7 years old.
Oh, man.
My mother's father died when she was very young. So they grew up without fathers. And the mantra of their childhood was survival. So sometimes my dad would say things to me that were very hurtful. And it was hard to let go of that.
Sure.
So when you see the reverse of that and you have somebody that is a mentor or somebody that reaches out to you and says, hey, you can do this, whatever arena of life, academics, career, just being a friend, athletics, man, it's powerful. So I think that's the question you initially asked me is what advice for other runners is give and receive. To whom much is given, much is required.
That's awesome.
So we have a stewardship.
Sure.
In the running community, and we saw that so well with Victor, who passed suddenly and unexpectedly. Victor was a giver, mentor. His life will continue to ripple through his running group that just ran Houston Marathon.
That's right, yeah.
So yeah, we want to be like Victor.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you've had all these races and all these places that you've traveled. So what has been a favorite race and why?
Yeah, there's a number. I'd say the first one, of course, is always important. So my first marathon was important.
Okay.
Even though I was completely unprepared for it, because it was back in the 70s. It was right after the movie Rocky came out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, it was November 1976. So everybody saw the movie Rocky. I was in Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia. So we remember the scene where he ran up the art steps,
Yeah.
museum steps, and so down there, that was a part of a loop course. So I ran up those steps, and with my buddy, I was 17, just turned 17, and my friend Bobby was 15. And we ran that stinking marathon, and I didn't know you were supposed to drink along the way.
Okay.
So by the time I got thirsty, it was like mile 17 or 18. And they were like, Philadelphia's so funny, these rough city people. They're like, hey, man, there's no more water cups. Sorry. And I'm like dying. I'm like, okay. And it was a loop course. Nobody told you how far along your course you were. There were no mile markings because it was like marathons were pretty new. So after what should have been the finish, my friend Bobby said, hey, we're done, because it was a loop course. It just was like out of my mind. So I was just running. But I was afraid we hadn't finished.
Wow.
So I'm like, well, I'm not stopping. So I kept going because I was like, I'm not cheating. This thing is, nobody's watching anything. There's
so there was no finish, like no finish line or anything?
there must have been like chalk marks on the ground or something. And so he's like, hey, we're done. But he was a real fastidious guy, so he was counting everything. I was just like, whatever. I don't feel like it's done. So I kept going. And it was loop, so I go out. And then I realized, wait a second. All the runners who were around me are gone. So I estimated I probably ran about a 50K instead of a 42K.
Wow.
And then I finished, and of course I hadn't drank. So I said to my friends, because we weren't driving then, I could drive, but I didn't know how to drive to Philly because we were living in the suburbs that time. So I was like, I'm thirsty. Can we stop and get something to drink? And they're like, no. But in spite of it, that's a memorable race.
Wow.
And then the marathon in Alaska was definitely memorable.
So was that one at midnight?
No, that was during the longest day of the year. They call it Midnight Sun.
Okay.
So it starts really early, like 6 or 7 a.m. I don't know. But so it was light, though, because it was all this light. That was really weird because I had the torn cartilage. So my longest training run was 8 miles. So I don't recommend that. But I'm young, and I did really well compared to Philly because I'm drinking. I'm like, I learned from 3 years ago when I was 17. Now I'm 20. So I drank, and I didn't even think about my knee. But then I finish, and it's a gorgeous course. We're running through all this beautiful stuff. You see moose along the race. I recommend everybody wants to run a cool marathon, go to Alaska. But then as soon as I finished, which was 3 hours and change, my buddy's there, and he's like, you got to go to work. Back in those days, I worked 16-hour nights. So I finished the race and didn't eat a meal. I just rushed back, showered, and worked 16 hours.
Stop it.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Whoa.
Yeah, I showered, but I couldn't eat because the cafeteria wasn't open at that time. Because I was in the hospital. I was working as a lab tech. So I can remember in the middle of the night sticking my legs up, and I'm like, oh, that's crap.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine if you've only done an 8-mile run, and then you've run 26, and it was very hilly.
No recovery time or anything.
Yeah,
like
I've done
that.
several marathons, and I didn't really get it right until I was 55.
Wow.
So
Okay.
if you're a beginning marathoner, be very kind to yourself. Don't worry if you screw up. Remember, try to train.
All the important things. Wow. Do you have a pre-race routine?
More so than I used to because I learned that it's valuable. So, just being around, they do warm up. Of course, my son is pretty studied in the area, so he got a master's in exercise science, and now he's in PT school. But yeah, so try to run a bit, try to keep warm, if at all possible, sleep well before the night before.
No dinner parties.
Yeah, and not a real long run before, but at least a mile or maybe 2, just slow pace. I'm not as good. Like I know a lot of young runners, and I really admire them, that do a lot of yoga and things like that, do a lot of stretching. I do some, but I'm pretty terrible. When I was younger, I could do it very easy.
Yeah.
But now at 63, I don't know. Maybe I should do more than that. So there's always room to improve.
That's right. Do you have a post-race routine?
Yeah, I definitely try to keep moving.
Okay.
So immediately
Okay.
after the finish line, I don't stop for anything. I just roll right through and keep going for a while. And I have to apologize usually to my wife or whoever's there. I'm sorry, I got to keep moving.
Gotcha.
And other than very hot weather, then I'll make sure I'm grabbing a lot of water and stuff like that because, the lactic acid, if it sets in, you're going to have problems for a while. The other big thing that I learned from my best marathon, which was age 55, I had Samson from Kenya as my coach, and he taught me about nutrition. And when you're young, particularly at my generation, nobody talks about nutrition.
Sure.
So knowing about protein replenishment after your long runs, in general, just a clean diet, massive difference in recovery. Yeah, so I definitely have changed. Of course, now that I've had the heart attack, I found weaknesses in my diet from that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which I was in denial. When they came into my coronary care unit, ICU at Providence, and they laid this diet thing on me, I'm like, what is this? I remember this dietitian coming in. I'm like, I don't think so. And my wife was there, and she's like, I think so. And so Mary's this Italian great cook, and so she's like, yeah, we're just going to change recipes. And it's made a huge difference. I dropped 20 pounds, and just in the last few days, I feel incredible. It's been a gradual recovery. And that's, again, back to healing is process.
Absolutely.
So you're a trainer, you're a coach. People need to invest in that. Because the thing is, we've got blind spots. I went through this thing with my eye, right? So I studied blind spots. So what is a blind spot technically? It's called scientifically a scotoma. So even within our normal human physiology, we have a blind spot, as we know, if we're driving.
Sure,
right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So we need two eyes. So I still suffer, even though I'm completely blind in one eye, I've got this other problem. And that is, it takes two eyes to see depth.
Wow.
You don't have depth perception. So when I first came home from surgery and treatment, put me in the kitchen, and there's like crash, boom, dropping stuff, because I see what I think is there. So there's a spiritual component to that, and just a life component to blindness. And that is, you can't see what you can't see.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Why do we need a coach? Because you can't see what you can't see. So friends can do that, but what do coaches do? They study, they have experience, they have perspective. They're invested in you, and they see things that you don't see. They see that your form's whacked. When you're fatigued, you run this way. Your arms do this. That's worth some money. People want to treat themselves. It's the worst thing you possibly do if you're ill is to Google what your symptoms.
Oh, WebMD. Yeah.
Well, people do that with running, and it's like a nightmare.
Yeah. Sure.
And then with health issues, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See a professional, especially if you had what I've had. I'm alive today because I sought professional help. And if you want to be better, if you're just starting out as running and you don't want to go the route of injury, start with a group like you're developing. Otherwise, sometimes if you're a high school runner or college runner, you have the benefit of that because that's somebody dedicated. But most people don't do it like that. Most people are running, trying to get to that 5K, trying to maybe do the Azalea, something like that. Well, don't do it alone. Otherwise, you'll get passed by a gorilla.
That's fine. The gorilla would still pass me. So I have to know, what is your favorite running item?
Yeah, I would say if I had to just choose one, I care about shoes. So,
okay.
I'm a missionary guy, so I don't have a lot of money. So I just try to get best value. So either Brooks or Asics, probably.
Okay.
I've used both, and they're fine. I'm old, so I don't need a super shoe or anything like that. I wouldn't mind if somebody donated it. So if you want to give to the Jim Mather Running Fund.
The carbon-plated shoe.
But I'm happy with Brooks. And, of course, they're constantly changing them, which drives me nuts. Why? Find a good shoe. And it's like, we don't make those anymore. I'm like, why not?
Well, that leads to the next question. So what has been your favorite running shoe? Have you always been in Brooks and Asics?
No, for years, like in the beginning, New Balance were the thing.
Okay.
Back in the 70s. They're sort of coming back. I remember my first New Balance, I thought I was spending a lot of money. It was $29. And it was mail order.
Wow.
Out of Boston.
Yeah, wow.
So they were made in America, and they was in the back of Track and Field News. I was around when they first developed Nike. And so in the beginning, Nike wasn't retail. Track coaches, because it was developed at the University of Oregon, they would go to running camps, and they would sell them in the back of their car.
That's wild.
Yeah, and they were all handmade. Like they called it the Nike waffle because they would literally seal the bottom of the shoe with a waffle iron.
Get out of here.
That's where the Nike waffle developed. So they look cool because they were hand stitched and the colors were neat, but they were really for narrow feet. So Nikes don't work for me.
Sure.
But, yeah. So over the years, like different things would develop. Before Nike, it was Adidas and Puma. They focused on track.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't until mid to late 70s they had this first running boom.
Okay.
And so you started to see some other shoes appear, but in comparison to now, they were junk. They didn't have adequate cushioning. They were terrible, but they were a lot cheaper. But I love it. I like to see all different kinds of shoes because we're all different kinds of people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I just try stuff. I know because of, if you haven't gone to a running store and gotten your running gait analysis, all of that, you really should, because
Absolutely.
then you'll know what kind of foot you have, whether you're pronate or supinate, or whether you're neutral, and that's, I sort of go by feel, but since I've been in Mobile, I've gone to both stores and I listen to them.
Dude, yeah, it's wild. And it's also so cool that as you said that, like, you didn't like that shoes change.
Yeah.
But with technology, they're always trying to find, okay, what's going to make the shoe
it's
lighter.
Yeah, if you're a beginning runner, this is your hour, because it used to be, first of all, in the 70s, you were just a weirdo if you were running.
Really?
It was really a negative connotation to be a runner. Now it's cool. People see it as a good thing. But in the 70s, people throw things at you out. Of course, you still get some of that, but it was very common. I can remember me even thinking that, because I didn't start out long distance. I was a sprinter.
Okay.
Because my father was a sprinter and a jumper. So I thought, I probably had the genes of my dad more so than my uncle. My uncle was a great runner. He ran the Olympic trials.
Wow.
And ran marathons, and the very first New York City marathon. Very competitive guy. But as I got older, even my teen years, I realized I can't keep up with these really fast running back types. Very muscular. I'm lean, and I got some speed, but that's why I just had to go longer. Coach said, sorry, you're not good for 100 meters anymore. You got to do 5K.
Yeah.
And I found out over the long haul that I liked it. Yeah, so if you're out there beginning running and you say, I don't know, I don't like this, it feels terrible, give it time. It always feels terrible. Gradual, incremental increases, and make it about relationships.
That's right. That's something that I equate running with is community.
Yeah.
Like, to me, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. And my mantra now is, at my age, over the last 10, 15 years, has been, life is all about relationships, and everything else is detail.
Oh, that's good.
So if there's not healthy relationships in the context of whatever you do, why are you doing it? You got to step back.
Yeah.
You say, well, I'm good at it. Yeah, but where's it leading? Is it isolating you? Is it taking you away from the people that matter the most to you? Then it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And people do that. That's where the addiction side comes in. You're getting a high. What is the reward for an addiction? It's a release of dopamine, norepinephrine to the brain. But if that reward is out of balance with the long-term reward, then you got to stop.
Yeah. Wow, that's really good.
Yeah. You just have to hold yourself accountable. Have people in your life that say, hey, I'm glad that you enjoy that, but it's really hurting our relationship right now. Maybe you need to step away. So I had that. So when I got married in 85, been married a long time. Well, I got married in 85, and I knew my responsibilities with being a young married guy, plus intense work in the hospital, wanted to have children, so having those children, I was like, yeah, I think I'll take a hiatus for this time.
Sure.
Got to be available, because I'm already sacrificing, because I'm working a lot of nights.
Sure, yeah.
My boys, I first had my boys, and my daughter was the youngest. I thought, I'm already tired. I don't need to take the risk of violating their time. So all of us are different. So it's not like it's right or wrong for someone else.
Sure.
I have to judge. What can I handle? What's the margins that I can handle effectively?
But as you've proven and said, and that is that running is always there to be picked up later.
Yeah.
So even if somebody's listening and they're like, you know what, I realize, or yes, I do need to take a break, just know that it's not, maybe not forever.
Yeah. The other thing, if it's a good thing for you, truly, your God will bring it back to you. I've had to say no to a lot of things in different seasons in my life, and I've kind of cried about it. I can remember leaving one particular school that I was passionate about, and I was just like, man, I know the Lord's leading me in a different direction. But I found that later I went back and was able to complete that studies, because I've studied a lot of things. That was theology. So I had that season I thought I was leaving forever, and it really wasn't. It's just, it's not now.
Sure. Ooh, yeah.
So not now is not ever.
That's good.
So yeah, hold on to your dreams. What's that great wisdom, Ecclesiastes chapter 3? There's a time and a season and a purpose for everything under heaven. So a wise man or woman is someone that recognizes the season they're in, fully embraces it, and lets the clock turn. And that's what faith is. It's faith is saying yes to now and being willing about the tension of the unknown. It's like, okay, I'm not God. I don't know about tomorrow, but if God is good, I have to settle that. But if God is good, then I can trust him with my future.
Sure.
And if it's really good for me, and if I really love it, it's probably coming back.
That's good.
In a different form. Instead of running like easy as an easy run, it might be 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes, whatever, simply because you're double your age or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Or you've gone through what I've gone through, broken this, broken that. But yeah, that's the cool thing about the running culture is like you're still a runner, whether you're running a 4-minute mile or a 12-minute mile.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
And yeah, we all pay the same. We're all running
Whereas
the same.
a lot of other sports, I mean, if you're not incredibly strong and like resilient, you probably can't play that sport. You just can't because you're just going to get hurt right away. Football, convention stuff. Oh, I think I'll play college football. No, I don't think so.
Right.
Unless you're going to get killed.
Yeah. Out of all your time, of all the things that you've learned, because as you said, you've mentioned that you had the one race that you did, the marathon, where you didn't drink, and then you learned that. Is there a way that you've learned to fuel during a race? Is there something that you like to take?
Yeah, my wisdom, I would say the longer I've been around and I've studied it as well as practiced it is, unless you have a health issue that would eliminate this, your body will talk to you. So this is one of the things I learned from the Kenyans. Okay, these are Kenyan guys that I hang out with. Is first of all, they have watches, but they seldom look at them while they're running.
Okay.
Because, and I've heard Eliud Kipchoge, some of the greats say, in Kenya, we run by feel. And so I've sort of trained myself to do that. So I could tell you, even though I have this watch, my wrist, I can pretty much tell you what my heart rate is when I'm running and when I'm at rest.
That's
without anything, without checking my pulse manually or anything. Because I have it, but I don't look at it. So I'm training myself. So that goes for effort and also goes for thirst. So you have a very complicated physiology in your thirst mechanism. Again, if you have a health condition such as diabetes, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, something like that, then you really need a method. Whereas if you're reasonably healthy without a metabolic condition, you can let your thirst talk to you. And your thirst is very specific. It's not just telling you to drink. It's telling you that there's something else too. So you can sort of discern whether you need electrolytes or not. So what's happened in the modern running boom is, even this recent boom, is you'll see people overhydrate more so than underhydrate. And that creates a condition of hyponatremia, which is extremely dangerous. That's low sodium. So you wash out your sodium with just drinking because I've told myself I'm going to drink this amount, ignoring your body. So yeah, I go by thirst. Now, if it's in Mobile summer, you got to pour it on, and that's because your thirst is going to be extreme. And then you, of course, need to pay attention to electrolytes as well. Yeah, but if it's just normal temps, yeah, just go by thirst.
That's awesome.
And then I try not to because I'm sensitive a little bit. I eat the wrong things before a race. So maybe some fruit. That's just me. Other people, the night before, they really have a big meal. I just do normal, even for a marathon. Yeah, because I think, again, this goes for shoes or clothing or diet. No change before a race. Whatever you do, you do. If you need to practice, so say if you've never run a marathon before, or even a half marathon, you just want to try things and try what works for you. Don't do it because you read it somewhere.
That's right, absolutely.
Pay attention to your thirst and your hunger all the time.
Yeah.
Because what you do on Tuesday before a race is just as important as the race day.
Absolutely.
Because you just don't stop that. A habit is going to come out on race day. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I love that. That's what I tell the group that we're training for with Azalea Trail. I'm like, those that want a goo or a gel pack, I'm like, go ahead and start experimenting now, to where come race day, this will work or won't work, because everybody's different.
I would say for anything that's 10K or less, you probably don't need goo, because the amount of hydration you're going to have to take to wash that down. Now it's getting better and less over the top in terms of
absolutely.
And then caffeine, be careful with caffeine. I drink a cup of coffee in the morning, but I noticed some of the electrolyte replacement stuff have added caffeine. And as somebody that's a coronary care nurse plus a heart attack, I can tell you your heart rhythm is directly correlated to two substances almost immediately. One is caffeine and one is nicotine. So your heart rate is extremely important element in your cardiac output. So you want to run well, you want to have a heart rate that matches your effort, not artificially induced increasing the rate. So caffeine's primary purpose is not athletic performance, it's alertness. So if you're running a race, you're excited.
That's true.
I'm not sure how, but if you're a coffee drinker, please don't stop drinking your coffee. Because if you stop saying, I'm not going to drink coffee today. No. If you normally drink a cup of coffee, Drink your coffee. Studies have been done in the coronary care setting. We used to have this, no caffeine in the coronary care. And then it's become a nightmare because people are freaking out and they're stressed out about not having their coffee. So studies have proven, whatever the normal routine is, don't stop it.
That's good. I like that. Very good. Do you have a favorite meal pre or post race that you're like?
Yeah, I love spaghetti.
Okay.
Before a meal. I love spaghetti almost every day. When I was 10 years old, my youngest aunt married a guy from Italy, Ronald Carrera. He was in the U.S. Navy. And he cooked spaghetti and meatballs for our family Thanksgiving. And the famous thing that my parents tell me over and over, my grandma, they were like, you blurted out the table, you're going to marry an Italian. I was 10. And so when I joined the military, I kept volunteering to go to Italy.
Okay.
But they never listened to me. And I met my Italian wife in Philadelphia. So
that is awesome.
So poor thing, she loves Italian food too, but not as much as I do.
Wow.
So sometimes I'll be eating spaghetti and she'll have something else.
Okay.
But in the morning of, if it's a short race, I don't eat anything, to be frank. Probably not good, but if I have anything, more recently I've been having like a half a banana or something like that. Longer race, like I do have a 15K coming up in February, Double Bridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll probably have something, probably fruit, like cut up apple, maybe a little peanut butter thrown in on the banana. But it's not that far.
Yeah.
I think I should be okay just hydrating.
Awesome. Do you run with music? Or
sometimes,
are you okay?
Sometimes for the longer runs if I'm by myself.
Okay.
But I'm careful with that because I know you have to watch your surroundings.
Sure.
I'm already like visually disabled, so I'm gonna need a truck hitting me or something.
So what does your running gyms? What is on that playlist?
Usually, I just go to something like contemporary worship.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll do podcasts.
Okay.
But I found recently that doesn't affect me the same way. It's probably just stick with the music because I do like to listen and study, but I don't have the same rhythm when I'm running. But when I'm with a group, then I'm just into the relationship.
Sure.
So when you go long, if you're training for something and you're going longer than your usual run, it's great to be with people because then that keeps you honest on your pace. So if you're not able to talk easily, you're going too fast. So my generation was influenced by some of the early pioneers in successful marathoning. They had this thing called LSD.
Okay.
There was a book called LSD, and that meant long, slow distance. My uncle was a real proponent of that based on a famous coach named Arthur Lydiard. So the idea is that's your base. So when you're not planning a race, you build your base. Of course, there's times just to rest. So after a long marathon or something you really trained for, say 4 or 5 months, you need to take a few weeks off.
Sure.
Just chill. Let your body chill. But in the 70s, that's my era of running more competitively, even for cross country, I was running 70 to 85 miles a week.
Wow.
So I'd run twice a day, 9 to 10 miles in the morning, and then interval work or speed work in the evening or afternoon. And that's why I was same height I am now, and I weighed 115 pounds. It's insane.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that. But yeah, just being able to talk. So when you're young, you can talk at a very fast clip. But now, like talking pace for me, like tomorrow, I'm probably going to run around 8 or 9 miles, 10, 15 per mile pace, and I'll just be chatting with a couple of guys. But whatever you're comfortable to talk at, you say, well, that's not really going to get me very fast in my pace. Yes, it will, because you're training your aerobic capacity. You're training your muscles to endure. And then you're also it's time on your feet. So all of those things work together for building you into the machine. You're basically changing your body.
That's right, yeah.
But don't try to do it too quick.
That's right. Well, that's so cool you brought all this up because that's exactly how we train with Run Your Story. That is with the training program. It is all about time on your feet. And
for a marathon, that's critical.
And I mean, we tell them, we're like, we don't care about your pace and we don't care about your mileage. We care about the time on your feet. Everything else will come.
That's the challenge. A lot of people have paid a lot for their watches, but you probably shouldn't look at them that much. And a lot of people are very critical. Like after a race, they'll look at their watch and they'll go, or after a race, particularly after training, they're like, oh, that's not good. And I'm like, that's not fair because your body will feel a certain way based on nothing other than a change. Or you could have some sickness coming on. So, don't chase numbers.
There you go. Absolutely. I love that. That's so
I know.
good.
Technology,
so good.
that's the downside of technology. it's really a downside. I mean, when I was young, the reason that we knew how far to run, we'd have to drive the car around. And you're hoping your car odometer works. And then as far as watches, you'd have a Timex. Just like, oh, yeah, I didn't check it before I ran. And then you sort of guessed at everything.
Okay.
And the only time you ever knew your time exactly was in a race. Probably the only time it matters.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I mean, we're not professionals. I mean, nobody's going to hand me $100,000
right.
check.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Yeah. But the other thing, but the good part about GPS and the technology is it's kind of a good safety feature for a lot of things. If things do get wacky, for example, the day I had a heart attack, I was able to look down at my watch and I'm like, oh crap, heart rate is out of whack. And I'm not doing anything. So that's when I laid down. And I knew I had to, there were some things that God had to do and there's some things I had to do. So if you have somebody who has some previous medical history or thinks they might be in that age range, if I had to do things differently, I would have had more extensive tests of my heart because my father did have heart disease.
Okay.
So family history is big.
Oh, sure.
There is no immunization from cardiac disease if you're a runner. Even very young guys had serious problems. We had a guy, Ryan Shea was his name, who was competing, I think it was Ryan. He was competing in the Olympic trials and had a heart attack and died in New York City.
Wow.
And he was an elite athlete. So,
yeah,
doctors are good and they're
that's
your
right.
friends.
Yeah, that's right. So you get done with a race. Is there a certain recovery tool that you like to use?
Yeah.
Okay.
More recently, because I had this torn ACL, I've had like some calf issues.
Okay.
So rolling it out. And then recently we had the Irish girl, Lauren Tinkler from Ireland, who's a great runner. And she was staying with us for a few days, and she had a massage gun. Can I fiddle with that? Can I fiddle with that? And I put that on my calf, which tends to tighten up, and it was just like gone.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that's cool. Like, I didn't know those things existed. I wasn't looking for it. Yeah, just those are helpful. I learned the roller thing was given to me by my physical therapist. Hey, you should use this kind of a thing, and it does help.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Do you have a favorite cross-training activity that you like to do?
Out of my leg injuries, first the fractured ankle and then the torn ACL, I purchased a indoor recumbent bike, and that's incredible. So Mobile, I think everybody should have one, unless you have a treadmill. I'm not really big on treadmills because I don't know what my deal is, but I get dizzy. Not when I'm running on the treadmill, but when I get off.
Okay.
Like 15, 20 minutes, I feel like,
the
spatial relation, I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's low stress on the joints, and I can do a lot. I can multitask, so I can listen to podcasts, listen to the Bible, music, and others take phone calls or whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
Because it's a recumbent, so I just
you just
lean
sit
back
back.
and I up. It's like got magnets on it, so it increases gets my heart rate up, and that's the only. So that's cool. Like I use that once or twice. And my wife does it too.
That's awesome.
So she uses that.
That is so
once
cool.
or twice. And if it's like really heavy rain or lightning, I ain't going out.
That's right. Yeah.
When I was younger, I would have. But I'm smarter, and I survived lightning storms by the grace of God. Because when I was younger, I would just be like, be tough. That dangerous mantra that kills young men all over the world.
Wow.
I'm tough. No.
So besides Philadelphia, have you had what you would call like a worst race?
Yeah, my worst race was, again, related to goals.
Okay.
My last race is a competitive high school athlete.
Okay.
I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I would call this how not to run your race. When you try to run another man's race, it's a philosophical approach is you can't live another man's life, and you can't run another man's race. So it was a 3-mile 5K. I can't remember if it was exactly 3 miles or 5K, but it was a championship race, the last race, and we're a good team. We were expected to be top 3 in the state of minutes for 5K. So I was the 7th guy out of this really good team, so I was barely in varsity. But I worked hard. But anyway, so I really, for some reason, got in my head, this is my last race, I've got to be top 10 in this race. It's a regional championship to qualify for state. And of course, I really want to do it. So the gun goes off, and my normal start would be to run a first mile in 5:20, and then try to go 5:20, 5:20, 5:30. So instead, I bumped it up, and I ran, 5:05, 5:10 for the first mile. And I felt fine. It was top 10. So I was like 7th or 8th. I thought, wow, this is going well. And then I get to the second mile, and weird things started happening because I'm, again, trying to run another man's race. I'd never done this before. You can't just mentally make yourself someone else. So I slowed down. I can't remember exactly what my second mile was, but I lost all feeling in my feet.
Oh, wow.
Probably just hypoxia. But again, like mentally, like when you have this mantra, be tough, you can believe something which isn't true, and that is that there are no barriers. You hear some of that. You're not. I'm not Kipchoge, right? Kipchoge talks about that, but he can back it up. He's got the body, the training. He's got the engine. So I was trying to run a Mercedes race in a Pinto body. So I lost feeling in my leg, in my feet, and so then I've still got another mile or so to go, and I was not in a good place. I got a little lightheaded, and a lot of people were passing me. So suddenly I'm in like 30th. There's a couple hundred people in the race, but so I'm like dropping back to 30th or 40th, and then I just fell down.
Wow.
So I just like collapsed, and of course after I collapsed, I got up, and I was just miserable.
Sure.
My father came over to console me, and I was just an idiot. I was just had a very bad response. Went home, and my moms are so great. Eat something or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not eating. So my father he was good. He gave me a good talk. And he said, hey, life's not about you. It's not about you. You should have been kinder to the people after the race. You should have been respectful. Your teammates were trying to console you. Yeah, it's not about you. So I listened to that. And then after an hour of commiserating, sort of moaning and groaning in my room, I was like, yeah, that's right. So I regret that. I regret how I responded to putting myself at the center of something that I should have never placed myself at. So again, instead of running my best race, being honest about who I am, I try to be somebody else. And that's what people do. And sometimes it's someone else putting that pressure on you. And I had some of that because my uncle was very successful, my father was very successful. But I'm not them. But it's hard for a teenager or a young person or sometime. You just have to understand we all have limitations.
Yeah.
Even the greats, they're not always going to be great. About 5 years ago, I read an article about a guy that holds still the world record and multiple gold medalist from England, who's a triple jumper. Triple jump like 60 feet or something. Incredible. And his entire career I think his last name is Edwards. I think it might be Jonathan Edwards. But the famous preacher, but I think he's also the athlete. But he went through a crisis when he retired from competitive running because his identity, although he was a self-confessed Christian, everybody knew his faith was important.
Sure.
He'd spent so many years tying his testimony to his performance that when that performance was no longer a part of his daily life, he lost his identity. And he was aware of it. So he's like, I feel myself disengaging from my faith. And he said this in this article, this interview. You can find it online. He said, I don't know who I am anymore. And so, yeah, that can happen even when you're training for a particular goal or even a good experience. That might be the only great race you ever have in those kind of terms.
Sure.
But just enjoy people and seek out you as a coach. Make sure that they know that the people around them are a big part of the experience too. Not just the knowledge they're being transferred. And they'll always have the relationships, but they might not always have the ability to run. God forbid. I mean, we want people to be able to continue to run. We want them to do what they love to do. But my uncle, who was an incredibly successful coach, runner, athlete, when he was still pretty young, in his late 50s, he was a champion masters runner as well. He developed Parkinson's.
Oh, wow.
And I wondered how that was going to affect him because he'd run 10 miles every morning for 40, 50 years. Wow. But, I admire the way he adjusted to that. He discovered a latent talent. He discovered something different about himself. And he became an artist. Even though his hands shook, I don't know how he did it, honestly, but he did this incredible art because he was forced to retire from his job. And I'm sure he would still have liked, in his mind, he probably was still running, but his body wouldn't let him. But there's a lot in us.
That's right.
So
it's so interesting that you bring that up with identity because that's something that I've talked with another coach in Miami about. And then with other people, I'm like, we're not just a runner. You can't just put us in a box. Like, yes, I run, but I'm also a mom. I'm also a wife. There's other things that make up who I am. Running is just a part of my story, just a part of it. And it's something that we have in common, and it's a thread that has us together, but it's not the entirety of who I am. So I get that, and I appreciate you bringing that up. That's super important. So that's awesome.
I mean, I hope I can keep running. I never thought that I would because I first ran in a team kind of thing when I was 14. I wanted to start younger, but my schools didn't have it. And so when you graduate from high school, particularly 40, 50 years ago, you think, oh, that's it. But it was interesting how I was able to get back to it. And of course, I've had these injuries and then a heart attack. And I'm okay with having to let it go.
Sure.
But so far, somehow I keep coming back. But if I do, I want to, for whatever else God has for me.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of makes life interesting is if sovereignly, providentially, I have to go through something. There's a blog I wrote one time and I called it Don't Waste Your Sorrows. A lot of times when we're grieving, grief is a normal human experience. But grief can be good grief or it can be bad grief.
Sure.
Okay, so good grief is the grief that is open to learning something new about myself, about why I grieve, what I'm missing. Because what is grief? Grief is the absence of love. So when we lose a relationship,
Sure.
when we lose an ability to run, or we lose a job, or we lose a child, all of those things are love being broken up. And if you don't go through the process well, because you don't know how, then you could be stuck. And so I think as a pastor / missionary / runner / husband / father, I think part of my job in life is to help people to process transition. So, because people are always in transition.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
I love that. It also means that like we never stop growing or learning because we're constantly
if we stop,
moving.
if you stop, and sometimes we do, because of pain. That's when you start dying.
Yeah.
So what is death? Death is the absence of life, but doesn't mean stopping breathing. Even clinically as a nurse, I can tell you they have different ways to frame death.
Sure.
Okay, you can have your heart stop, but survive for a period of time. I've helped bring people back several minutes, up to 20 minutes back. They've stopped breathing. Heart stop. But there's something still there. But there's an emotional aspect to life, there's a mental aspect and there's a relational aspect to life that when we cease to engage, it's a form of death. And it's probably more painful than physical death. Because physical death is out of our control.
Sure.
But and all these other things. But if you can have somebody with you, so join a running group, find the training group that you need to be with, and then you'll be a much better person, not just a better runner.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
So we have to expand our ideas about what it means to be successful. And because why would people keep running sometimes when they have an injury or they want to come back? They're not necessarily coming back to run, they're coming back to be with friends.
That's right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And you can let people belong. I have all these certain principles and mantras, I call them. I said, before people can believe anything, they need to know they can belong. So if someone's going to believe that they can run a 5K, say they've never run, the first doorway is to letting them belong. Hey, listen, you don't need to run with us. You just come hang out. You just want to have a cup of coffee with us. Hey, we do have coffee at the end, or whatever you guys do, just break bread together. Let that be for a while. And then over time they realize, hey, I can take a few steps. Or I can just do the run walk for longer.
That's right.
That's fine. That's good.
I love that. That is awesome. So going into advice, what advice would you give to someone that's wanting to get started in their running or walking journey?
Okay, yeah, I would take it back to my first, when I transitioned from a sprinter to a long distance runner. And it's kind of corny, but this is what I did. I just ran like half a mile as far as I could go without stopping.
Okay.
And then I would add a telephone pole or two a week.
Okay.
Until I got up to my race distance, which was for high school, which was in track, it was 2 miles, and then cross country was 5K. So, yeah, just very gradual. I'm all about not increasing distance rapidly. I feel like a lot of the training plans that you have out there that you just download or whatever, not the personal coach, they're too shortened. So if I was taking somebody from zero and they say to me, I want to run a marathon, I would try to convince them that's not really where you want to start as a goal. If you want to run a half marathon, don't have a 12-week plan, have a 1-year plan. That's my advice. I think your body adapts in a healthy way, longer blocks of time. I get the American culture. We see something, we have a friend that inspires us. We say, I want to be like them. Well, I don't know, particularly if you're older, because you're already got a lot of mileage on your body, let's say.
Sure, yeah.
Or you've had some previous health issues. Yeah, I would say a personal approach and planning, work in consultation with, can tell you the truth. I'm not sure. I'm glad I didn't initially run a marathon. Even though I wasn't fully prepared for that first marathon,
Sure.
I'd still run up to 15 miles in cross-country practice with a group.
Yeah.
So I was going to get to the finish line for
Yeah.
sure. And I was young. Whereas I'm, say, 40, 45, 50, something like that, maybe I'm not in the best of shape. I would try to successfully complete a few half marathons
Sure. Yeah.
before I'd go even 10Ks. Unfortunately, we don't have too many 10Ks. So what you could do instead, this is the way I would adapt to it. I would do time trials. I would just say, that's how my uncle started with his guys, is he'd just take a bunch of racing bibs, which he bought, put them in his trunk, bunch of water, measure off the course, and nobody pays anything, and they just have a race.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
So you just chalk off your course in an area somewhere in town on an early morning, Saturday or Sunday, and you just say to your train group, we're doing a 10K today. And throw it at them and say, and no registration fee. You could even do old T-shirts, which sometimes Port City Pacer does that. Czechoslovakia. You find your old shirts, and you just trade old shirts.
I love that. That's cool. That's awesome.
Then you've got the experience, low stress, around friends.
Yeah.
And then you sort of know how your body responds.
That is so good. I love that. Do you have any running goals? Are there any races that you're like, I want to run this?
Yeah, since I had my heart attack June of last year, I wanted to see, first of all, that I could do the 12K, which I did. And then this year I was in the Philippines that time, so I had to say, no, I can't do that, even though I'd registered. So I had to miss that because I was doing a missions trip. So this year I wanted to get back to the double bridge. Okay. So I hadn't done that since before my heart attack. Okay. That was what was weird. I was doing all these things, running and not having any symptoms. And I don't really know exactly how that all played out to have a heart attack. But it's good to get back because that's a cool race. It's so inspiring. You're around all these Marines running in formation and a very youthful thing. You feel pulled along, even though it's freezing cold usually every time. February 4th. So, that's a cool one to go for. Maybe longer term, maybe a half. Okay. But not anytime soon. Because I think 15K has been cool. Yeah. To train for, I think I'm ready. We'll see. Yeah. Again, you'll be in the front and I'll be like, you got this, Jeb. You go, buddy. Yeah. I'm going to be in the back. I'm the party pace. It's cool. I think it's a good Gulf Coast race. If you're listening and you haven't done the double bridge, man, it's a really cool race. They are super organized. Yeah. As they are at the Battleship 12K. I love that. It's my favorite race. Yeah, and I was inspired by the owner of the great ice cream store in town that told me all about the Battleship 12K. What's the Cammie? Yeah, Cammie. I love Cammies. So she raved about that race. Of course, it's a good cause. I'm a veteran, so yeah, those are my two faves. And of course, I am signed up for the Azalea Trail, the 10K. Yeah. I've been doing the 5 the last few years, but I think 10K would be fun. Yeah, it's awesome. It's so good. You've talked a little bit about mantras. So is there one that on harder days when you're running that you tell yourself? Now it's kind of a reverse mantra. Okay. Because when I was younger, I would always try to push. But I would say now I have, maybe after the pain of not listening to my body and my wife's warnings to me, because after my heart attack, she's like, I'm there for you, but don't do anything stupid. So, and I know your wife, and I could just imagine her saying this in the nicest, sweetest way. When Mary says stuff in the corrective mode, she does it so well. She could be like a master of, like, teach a class on how to confront your husband. Because like 6 months after we were married, we had our first major argument, and I got home from work, and she pulled up a chair pretty close to me and leaned in really nicely, and she's just oozing sweetness. And she said to me, so we've been married 6 months now. How do you think things are going? And I thought, they're going great. But the whole thing seemed to be like prepped. I'm like, not really reading the tea leaves. So I was like, how about you? And she's like, not so great. I just have to say that. And here are the issues. And I'm like, wow, that was a really good way to confront me. So my mantra now is probably my wife's sweet voice saying to me, "Be careful. Come home, Jim."
I really love that.
A reverse mantra. Because I do have that still weird, men, I don't know if it's testosterone, I shouldn't have that much, I'm older, like I should have reduced testosterone levels, but I somehow still have some. So I just go crazy, and I think I'm younger than I am, and so, yeah, I need to dial back, because I want to be in the race for the long haul.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Some days you're just going to run well. You're just going to run well. And some days you're not going to run well. So again, it's back to the Kenyans. Pay attention. So yeah, it's kind of a cool thing to do. You might want to have your athletes try to experience that and play with that a little bit. Once they get a little more experience, have a no-watch day.
Yeah.
And then, what do you think your heart rate was?
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
What do you think you did? And you, of course, monitoring them for them. You're the only one with the watch that day. You don't say anything.
Yeah.
And you say, hey, listen, your body knew. So let that just be something that helps you and doesn't hurt you.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. That is so cool. So all these races you've done, what has been your favorite length to run?
Half marathon.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's in between. Like the challenge with the marathon is you have to be really careful with your time because, again, the addictive nature of running, and then sometimes you have to make sure your spouse, if you're married, or you have a significant other, or your children, or whatever's going on in life, do I have the margin to train very seriously for 4 to 6 months, depending on your background? Because there's no way around it. Even if you're a pretty good runner, the amount of time you're going to have to put on your...
Oh, it's like having a part-time job.
Right.
It's
after I was 55 when I did my last marathon, but I had margin, and I asked all the people in my life, is this okay? Did I do this? Is it okay with you? Because this is what I need to do. This will be the time blocks. Will it work for what I'm responsible for in my relationship with you, in my relationship with everything else? And that was the last time it worked. And then, of course, I have a lot of other things that have happened health-wise. So I think, I might be done for marathons. Never say never, but in practical terms, probably not. But half, I can manage the time, and it's just enjoyable. It's a challenge to figure, okay, the biggest challenge is not the 21K, it's the last 5K.
That's right.
No matter how you train, if you don't run smart, you're doomed. But I like that kind of a challenge.
Yeah. You brought up another great point, and that is something when we had our kickoff meeting for the training program, and that was you don't fit your life into running, but you fit running into your life. Yeah. So you don't stop living. You don't, like, this should be fun. Running should be community, and it should be fun. You should want to say, hey, I can't wait to go and train with my group or with my people, but you don't try to stop living your life to try to fit in.
Yeah, and then like when you're in a situation where you don't have the time margin, 5Ks are great. They're over pretty quick, and you can walk that fairly easily. In Mobile, we have the advantage of a lot of flat areas. So, if I know that I'm recovering or don't have time, then I'm just going to do 5Ks. I've noticed guys that have been incredible over the masters, guys that are older than me now. Yeah, they're tending to just stick more with the 5K and occasional. Their longest run of the year would be a half or a 10 mile or something like that. Fine. Yeah. Bonds are extremely rewarding in some ways, but again, if it doesn't work for your life and the people you care about, don't do it. That's my advice.
Yeah, so good.
You're not less a runner if you don't do it.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're not running, what does Jim like to do?
I'm a big reader.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
A lot of history. I find that, what's the old saying, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. So, I became a passionate history reader about the same time I started running.
Okay.
The first book I read as a child, I learned to read when I was 5. On my mother's knee, and it wasn't a child's book. It was a book about the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
I'm 5, and I haven't stopped. So if I wasn't doing what I'm doing vocationally, I'd probably be a history teacher because I love that as a passion. And then I do some writing.
Okay.
Just to be reflective. So I need to do more writing. I've had people ask me to, because I do some teaching, like in my church and things like that with Friends of International. And so they're like, you need to write down what you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
So I need to, that'll probably be the next season of my life.
Okay.
Be more of a writer.
I love that. That's awesome. Hey, I would read your stuff. I'd read it.
Well, thank you.
Jim, any other final words of wisdom?
Yeah, in closing, I'd say that there's two things that sort of encapsulate all of life, and that is love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's a big thing. It's a small sentence with a big after story, but
Absolutely.
yeah, sometimes you just need to say, how is your love life? And I'm not talking about dating or even your marriage.
Right.
I'm talking about just everything. When you feel a certain sense of coldness in your heart towards yourself or towards others or towards even the idea of God, then that's just like having a heart attack. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say that. And find help. Ask for people that you admire, that might be you see something in them. That we have coaches for running. Well, sometimes we need relational coaches. We need spiritual coaches. Yeah, that would be my last word on the podcast.
I love. Thank you so much. I have loved this, Jim. I already knew I would. I was really looking forward to this.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the invitation.
But I've loved this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Jim, for sitting down and sharing your run story. It was incredible. It was inspirational. It was challenging. Just all the mantras and nuggets of wisdom that Mr. Jim brought, just absolutely incredible. And I am so very thankful for that, as it's all about perspective and prioritizing. Again, as he said, talk to your people, and it's about community. There's so much about community with running. And guys, I am so thankful for our mobile running community, because we are a mobile running community. And so for all of you that are a part of that, I just want to say thank you, because you are leaving such a legacy and you're building a legacy. And that is incredible. I am just so thankful. And for those that are listening and you're like, I'm not quite sure, I promise you fit in, you belong, and you matter. And so come and join us. Find your people. There are so many groups that are going on at different times of different days. And so just join one. Just show up. I love that. And so to our running community, I just want to say thank you, because you are living exactly how Jim said. And that is to be open to people and to do life with people. Yes, we are a running community, but we're more than that. I am grateful for that. So again, such an impactful and empowering story. And so I'm eternally grateful for that, and all of that Mr. Jim brought. That was just wow. As always, this podcast would not be possible without Gilliard Tech Services and Greg Gilliard himself. What a talent they use to make Run Your Story happen. And not only just from the podcast side, but from the website side. So grateful. You can get in contact with Gilliard Tech Services at gilliardts.com to help him build your website or refresh your existing one. So he can do that, guys. Super talented. You'll want him. He also does tutoring for high school students. So definitely get out with him. Greg Gilliard at Gilliard Tech Services. You will not be disappointed. As always, a huge shout out to Mars Hill Church for providing such a safe location for Run Your Story. It's a home for us to be able to have this location and have a safe spot for us to be able to share our stories. So huge thank you and shout out to Mars Hill Church. Guys, Patreon is where it's at. It's where I need you to be at. So go support us. We are less than a cup of coffee from Starbucks. Yeah, I said it. We're cheap like that. So go help support us, because this has been such an honor to be able to tell your stories. So Patreon, $5 a month, guys. Huge. Makes all the difference in the world. So eternally grateful that you share us on social media and you share us with your friends and with your family, because this is your story and they are a part of that story. We are so thankful. Guys, as Mr. Jim shared his story, it is a part of your story, just like it's a part of mine. And so when you go out there and you hit the pavement, run your story, because every story needs to be heard.